Good morning. Today's daf is Yud Zayin. So we're going to pick up on the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the Mishnah, and hopefully everybody has a sheet. We'll be referring to it a couple of times throughout the day today. So it says that sometimes I'll just tell you the number of the picture on the sheet. You don't really have to go into it too much, but a visual aid sometimes is a little bit helpful. So the Gemara says the following. Mishnah says the following. If a person distanced the schach from the walls 3 tefachim, psula, that's picture 96. Right? Then halacha lemaisa, the schach, ultimately the sukkah is pasul. Rashi points out over here psula, the avir postil b'shlosha, afilu minat sad, because ultimately again more than 3 tefachim is not going to be lavud, and therefore again airspace on the side will go ahead and pasul the sukkah. Bayis sheniftach v'sichech al gabav. If you have a home, and let's say again on both sides, the way the Gemara illustrates this case is the roof collapses in the middle. This is picture 97. The roof collapses in the middle, and lemaisa again you put schach there on the middle. So the Mishnah says, if there are 4 amos from the wall to the schach, psula, then lemaisa again the sukkah is possible. So Rabbi say here the Mishnah's we already saw this before much earlier in the Masechta, but the Mishnah is introducing us to the concept of dofen akuma, of the bent wall, which the Gemara will expound upon a little bit more. But the idea is that if the pasul schach is within 4 tefachim of the wall, if the schach is within 4 amos of the wall, then lemaisa again the sukkah will in fact be kosher. Look at Rashi psula. So to continue in that Rashi says the following. He says psula the abir posel b'shlosh afilu min atzad umikanani Omer mefarish hada aminan shebeschach posel min atzad aminan dofen akuma lahach shir ad 4 amos. That which we say that when you have schach posel is very interesting. We now have 2 cases. When there's empty space, so empty space on the side will invalidate if there's 3 or more tefachim of empty space. On the other hand, if you have a roofed area between the wall and the schach, ultimately will not passel less than will only passel dalet amos or more. So Rashi says, Hanu dechashilin l'schach ki'ilu min hadofen v'ne'ekam v'nichpach l'mala. So Rashi understands what the Mishnah is introducing us to is the concept of dofen akuma, which says that the way we view, if you're looking at picture 97, that the way we would view this is that the wall is considered as if it's bent, and therefore the wall in fact extends, it goes up, and then it goes sideways to extend to the schach. And we'll see dofen akuma is a halacha l'moshe misinai. So Rashi points out over here, u'ba'avira lekelamei marhachi ve'eni mefarish ronas adofen kilu akum. V'halach tachas haschach pasul u'magia l'schach kasher u'motzies ha'psul min ha'sukkah de'im kein gabi avir nami neimachi. So both say one of the interesting things we will discuss with dofen akuma is what is the status if you sat underneath the roofed area. So remember again, what the Mishnah is telling me is like this: if I have a sukkah that then now has dalet amos of roof, or for that matter schach pasul, anything other than open air space, as long as it's less than dalet amos between the wall and the kosher schach, the sukkah is kosher because I call that dofen akuma. I view that as a bent wall. Rashi says, just be careful. What this tells you is the area underneath the schach is kosher. It doesn't tell you that the area underneath the bent part of the wall is kosher. We'll see that later on in the Shulchan Aruch. V'chein chaser shimukefas achsadra. So too, if you have a chaser that literally is enclosed, achsadra bosa in this context means like a porch overhang. If you take a look in picture 98, so you can see over here you have the chaser. The achsadra over here means like each of these homes has like a little roof over it, and what you do is you place schach across the chutzner on that roof. So this is the same exact case pretty much as before as the house case. Both cases are employing dofen akuma, because in both cases what you have over here is you have schach in the middle, but then you have the schach is really resting on something that is not kosher for schach, and you have walls. So the Gemara Mishnah again says that as long as the schach is within dalet amos to the wall, we view the achsadra as being a bent part of the wall. Sukkah gidola shekifua b'davar shein mesachachin bo. If you have a large sukkah and you went ahead and you literally enclosed it with material that is not kosher for schach. So I'll say this is picture 99. So if you see over here, you have this large sukkah. That white over there represents pasul schach. That's whatever it is. It looks like siding, right? Whatever it is, it's not kosher for schach. And what happens? And in the middle over there, you have a patch of kosher schach. So what does the Mishnah say? Im yesh tachtav arba amos psula. So again, the Mishnah indicates that l'maisa, if there's more than dalet amos or more of space between the schach kosher and the walls, then l'maisa, again, the sukkah is pasul. Less than dalet amos, sukkah is kosher. So we'll say what has now come out is the Mishnah has given 3 different illustrations of dofen akuma. Remember, there are 4 cases in the Mishnah. 3 of them all rely on the same concept. So remember, the Mishnah therefore teaches us 2 different ideas. Number 1, the Mishnah tells us that when there is airspace, when there is open space by the side of the sukkah between the wall and the schach, 3 tefachim or more of space invalidate the sukkah. However, when there is not airspace, but there is schach pasul, l'maisa, again, as long as it is within dalet amos, as long as the schach kosher is within dalet amos of the walls, then l'maisa, again, the sukkah is kosher by utilizing the concept of dofen akuma. The Mishnah then gives us 3 different cases of dofen akuma. One is bayis sheniftach, that's picture 97, where the roof of the house caves in, you put schach there in the middle. Case number 2 is the achsadra, where you use the overhangs of the homes as the rooftop to support the schach. And case number 3 is sukkah gedolah shekiflo b'davar she'misachach in bo. All these, again, we'll discuss why I need 3 cases, but l'maisa, again, all say the same basic concept. As long as the schach kosher is within dalet amos of the walls, the sukkah is kosher. Says the Gemara. Kol hanim lamimli. Oh, so we don't have to wait too long. So the Gemara asks, why do I need 3 cases of dofen akuma? Tell me 1 case, and I get it. To which the Gemara says, Shricha, I'll tell you need all the cases. Why? Di'i ashmo'inon bayis sheniftach. If you would have just told me the first case, picture 97, of the home whose roof collapses, I might have said, Mishum dahani mechitzos lebayis avidon. Because in the case of the house, when you're utilizing these walls, these are bona fide mechitzos that are there for the structure. They're there for the structure. So I might have said, when do you say dofen akuma? When at least you're working with walls that were really made to service this particular structure. Aval chotza mukefas achsadra, the mechitzos lav la achsadra avidi emalo. But in the case of also, which is picture number 98, case of the achsadra, I might have said maybe you don't say dofen akuma in that case. Why? Because the walls that you're utilizing are the walls of the sides of the home, and the walls of the sides of the home are not there to serve as walls for the achsadra. They're there to serve as walls for what? For the homes. So therefore, again, emalo, I might have thought not. Therefore, tzricha. So we'll say now I understand why I need the case of bayis and I need the case of achsadra. V'ashmo inon hani tarti. And if it would have just told me these 2 cases, mishum de sichachan schach kosher. Because they're both say again. Here's what's interesting. If it would have just told me the case of the bayis and the case of the achsadra, I might have said, why can you say dofen akuma in those cases? Because l'maisa, again, or why are those cases kosher? Let me say it like that. Because l'maisa, in both the cases of the bayis as well as the achsadra, technically speaking, even the areas that are quote unquote not schach kosher are schach kosher. What does that mean? The material itself is technically material that could be used for schach. How so, Rabosai? Because again, what was the roof of the home and what was the roof of the achsadra made from? Nisarim, wood boards. Remember, we already learned about wood boards at the beginning of the week, talking about Gzera Stikra, right? The Gzera about the rooftop. But again, technically speaking, wooden beams can be used for sukkah. So I might have said maybe the case of the bayis and the case of the achsadra work because lemaisa, even though I'm not going to really utilize the roof of the house and the roof of the achsadra, at the end of the day, technically, it is kosher for schach. However, aval sukkah gedola shekifua b'davar she'in misachachin bo. But in the case of the sukkah gedola, also has picture number 99. In the case of the sukkah gedola, where the schach all around the kosher schach is pasul, is not kosher for schach, the sichacha schach pasalu emalo. I might have thought that case does not work, meaning maybe perhaps I don't apply the concept of dofen akuma there. Therefore, tzricha. Therefore, also what the Gemara points out is that each of the cases of the Mishnah, although they all employ the same concept of dofen akuma, they are dissimilar cases. And had I just stated one, I would not have automatically been able to infer the other two. Therefore, Mishnah states all three. Omer Rabba. Rabba said the following. Ashkach sinhu l'Rabbanon debei Rav, tiyasi v'kamri. So Rabba said, I was sitting, and or I should say, I found the students of Rav that were sitting and saying the following, v'kamri. Avir posel b'shlosha, schach posel posel ba'arbo. And the Talmidim of Rav were saying the following. Avir, if you have airspace, meaning open space, we're both saying, now remember, this is talking about not really in height anymore, although it does apply in height like we saw yesterday, but we're now talking about, let's say, airspace by the side, distances between the wall and the schach. So the Talmidim of Rav are saying the following, that if you have avir, if you have open space, that passes, that will invalidate the sukkah, b'shlosha, 3 tfachim. So if you have 3 tfachim of open space, but it's 3 tfachim, of course, 3 tfachim or more, of open space between the wall and the schach, that invalidates your sukkah. However, schach posel ba'arba. But interestingly enough, schach posel, we'll say now, what's schach posel? Schach posel is anything else that's not avir. As long as the space is filled in, that's all called, with schach posel, that's called schach posel, and therefore that pasels with 4. Barba. Va'aminu lahu. And I remember we'll say, this is Rabbah saying to them, and I said to them, I said to them, Avir de posel b'shlosha minalahu. Where do you know that avir, that empty space, passes the sukkah with 3? This none, because we learned in the Mishnah, Hirchik es asichuch mi'adefanos shlosha tvachim psula. So the Talmidim of Rav pointed to a Mishnah. And the Mishnah, of course, is uncontested. No one argues. So they point to the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? If you distance the schach from the wall 3 tefachim, then the ma'aseh the sukkah is pasul. So the Gemara says, psula, schach pasul nami lo lifsal, ella ba'arba amos. But if that's the case, then why do you say that schach pasul pasels with 4 tefachim? Remember again, Rabbosai, when Rabbah is reporting on this, the Talmidim of Rav are saying that avir pasels with 3 tefachim and schach pasul pasels with 4 tefachim. So Rabbah says, I don't understand why you say that. If you're saying that schach pasul pasels with 3 tefachim based on the Mishnah, I can tell you that you should say that schach pasul, that avir pasels with 3 tefachim. I would tell you based on the Mishnah, then you should say that schach pasul pasels with what? With 4 amos based on the Mishnah. This nan, because what does the Mishnah say? Bayis sheniftach v'sichech al gabov, because we learned that if you have a home and the roof collapses and you place the schach on top of the roof, im yesh ben hasichoch lekosal dalet amos psula. If there is less than dalet amos from the wall to the schach, then lemaisa what? Then that's called, then it's kosher. So we'll say, so what Rabbah is trying to prove from there is, what do you see from there? That schach posel only invalidates at a distance of dalet amos or more. So why are you saying dalet tfachim? Va'amruli, and the Talmidim of Rav said back to me again, this is Rabbah now talking. The Talmidim of Rav retorted back to me and they said, Bar minei dahi, you should leave this case alone. That case is a different case. Why is this a different case? Rav u'shmuel de'armi tarvayu mishum dofen akuma naguba. Oh, and they said to Shmuel, they said to Rabbah, because Rav and Shmuel understand that case to be a case of dofen akuma. Or in other words, what they were saying to Rabbah is, you're dealing with apples and oranges. The case of schach pasol, the case of arba amos is limited to a specific case of dofen akuma and does not apply to regular cases of schach pasol. Now, what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, "Diravu shmul darmi tarvam mishum dofen akuma naguba lahachshir da'amiran dofenhu v'lo schach ve'ein kan psul." So remember, Rabbi saying the law of dofen akuma and Rav and Shmuel both agree that this indeed is a halacha l'Moshe misinai. So the law of dofen akuma says the following: that if you have schach pasel that comes up, that goes up right next to a wall, and then within 4 amos of that schach pasel you have schach kosher, that we view the schach pasel not as being schach pasel, but rather as what? As being part of the dofen, being part of the wall. But look how Rashi qualifies this. V'chi armiran ba'arba. So we'll say, here's what we have to try to figure out. Here's what we know so far. We have airspace by the side, pasels by how much? 3 tefachim. Good. Dofen Akuma works as long as it's less than 4 amos. But here's the problem. The students of Rav said that schach puzzles by arba tfachim. So something doesn't stim here, because again, everybody agrees to Dofen Akuma. So if everybody agrees to Dofen Akuma, then what's the case of schach puzzle that passes by 4 tfachim? So look what Rashi says. The Chiyam Rinan, this is the last short line in Rashi, of not of the shortest lines, but the medium lines. The Chiyam Rinan arba. What's the case where 4 tfachim of schach puzzles? Kigon be'emtza. Oh, this is talking about when you have schach puzzle in the middle of the sukkah. Now, also you understand, middle doesn't have to mean middle. What does middle mean? Anything more than 4 amos away from the dofen. Anything more than 4 amos away from the wall. Kigon be'emtza. Rachok mirakosa dalar amos. De'eno yochol levatlon al yedei akimas dofen. Because remember again, once the schach puzzle is more than dalar amos away from the wall, dofen akuma no longer applies. V'nimtza chodseitz besukkah ben kosher lekosher v'arba having makom chashav lios chatzis. I'll say it's a fascinating case. So remember again, the first 2 cases of dofen akuma and avir, the common denominator is they both represent space, right, areas right between the wall and the schach kosher. So again, Avir is going to passel with more than 3 tvachim. Schach passel, as long as it's by the side of the wall, the law of Dofen Akuma comes along and says you're covered for up to Dalet Amos, up to, not including Dalet Amos. Dalet Amos or more, Lamais again becomes passel, because again the schach kosher is no longer connected to the Dofen. What happens however if you have a patch of schach passel? Also, Rashi doesn't say this. But we'll see this later on that the assumption is that you have actually a strip of schach puzzle that runs across the sukkah. So imagine the following scenario. I have, let's say, 6 amos away from my walls, a patch of non-kosher schach. So at what point in time does a patch of non-kosher schach become problematic? To which the students of Rav said, our Rebbe told us, 4 tfachim. Rabbi said, listen to this. This is amazing. Because for tfachim. The patch itself is 4 tfachim. It has to be more than 4 amos away from the sides of the wall, because again, that way it's not attached to the dofen. Again, remember, now we're off the dofen akuma case. We now have a patch of non-kosher schach that is not subject to dofen akuma because it's more than 4 amos from the wall. How much of a patch it creates a problem? 4 tfachim. Why 4 tfachim? Remember, we know this before, right? 4 tfachim is the minimum area of a significant reshus, of a makom. It's the basic definition of a makom. Dalet al dalet. We've had this again in Shabbos. We had an Erevin. An area less than dalet by dalet is not significant. So what does a patch of and remember again, this is, you have to understand that it's running across the sukkah. So what, we have a picture?
Does it have to be running across? It could be
amazing. Look, so 101. So now, again, so what happens over here? Thank you, Rashi. So when you go ahead and you have this area of schach pas, so we'll say, what does it do? It essentially breaks the sukkah in 2. Now, both say again, understand that, remember, a sukkah only needs 3 walls. It actually needs less, right? It needs 2 walls and a tefach. So assuming that you're using a 3-wall sukkah, what happens if you have, like in 101, a patch of non-kosher sukkah that runs through it? What happens? It essentially bisects the sukkah and creates 2 non-kosher sukkos. Why 2 non-kosher sukkos? Because now you only have 2 sukkos that have 2 walls each. So those are the 3 cases of both sides. So again, one more time, then we have to go on. Number one, Avir is problematic if it's 3 tvachim. Number 2, Dofen Akuma, as long as again the schach kosher is within Dalet Amos of the dofen, and there is schach pasel filling in that area. That's dofen akuma. But again, when it comes to schach pasel in the middle of the sukkah, an area of 4 tefachim will create a problem. And now Rabbah said. Now remember, this is all a conversation between Rabbah and the Talmidim of Rav. And Rabbah said, I said to them, "Va'amilu ana ma ilu ika schach pasel pachos mi'arba." Now imagine if you had the following situation: if you had schach pasel that was less than 4 tefachim, va'avir pachos mishlosha mai. So we'll say this is picture 102. So Rabbah poses the following case to the students of Rabbah. He says, what about if you have the case like this? I have schach pasel less than 4 tefachim, and right next to it I have an open area of less than 3 tefachim. So he asked them, what is the halacha in such a case? And they said to him, kshera. They said it's kosher. I will say, why is this case kosher? Why is this case kosher? Because schach pasol less than dalet tvachim is like what? Is like it doesn't exist. Open area less than 3 tvachim is like what? Like it doesn't love it, like it doesn't exist. So therefore, again, you're playing off two halachic technicalities. But lemaisa, again, these two areas, although again you have an area a little bit less than 7 tvachim of that doesn't have schach kosher, we reckon them each on their own, and therefore again, lemaisa, it's not a problem. So now I will say this is what we call a leading question. So Rabba's setting them up. Look at this. Says, okay, so let me throw something in now. Now, what happened? Malye b'shipudin. Rabbi say picture 103. What happens now if you took that open space and you filled it in with shipudin? What are shipudin? Shipudin are metal rods. Metal rods. Or in other words, what are you doing now? You're filling it in with schach pasel. So malye b'shipudin mai. So what would be the halacha there? So they said to him, oh, in that case, psula. Right? Why is it psula in that case, Rabbi say? Because Lamaisa, again, remember what's happened over here. Now you have effectively more than dalit tfachim of what? Of schach pasel. So Rabbi says, 1 second, I don't understand. So the Gemara says, my psula, so I'm sorry, below yehi avir, haposel b'shlosha, kischach pasel haposel ba'arba. The Rabbi says, so says Rabbi, but I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense. Because the Rabbi says, avir is more chomer than schach pasel. Right? How is avir more chomer than schach pasel? Oh, because avir again pasels. I'm sorry. It's a very emotional Gemara for me. So the Gemara says the following. Because remember, avir pasels with less than with 3 tvachim. With 3 tvachim, schach pasel only pasels how much? 4 tvachim. So Rabbi says, I don't understand. If the sukkah wasn't possible because of avir, which is more chomer, so how could introducing new material, schach pasel, which is more kal than avir, now invalidate the sukkah? V'amru, and the students of Rav fired back to me. Ihachi, okay, if you want to play this game. Ihachi lididach nami. Well, we could ask this on you as well because you said what? The amrit schach pasel posel ba'arba amos. So also remember, Rabba holds that schach pasel pasels with arba amos, and Rabba holds this. Rabba holds this both by the side as well as by the middle. So Lamais again, if you hold that schach pasel is pasel ba'arba amos, ma'ilu schach pasel posel pachos midalid. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let me read that again. Lidi dachna with the amrit schach pasel posel ba'arba amos. Ma'ilu ika schach pasel pachos midalid amos. Let's say you have the following case: schach pasel less than dalad amos. So we'll say this is going to be picture 104. So this is the students of Rav asking on Rabbah. So now let's say you have the following case: you have schach pasel less than dalad amos, and what happens? Va'avir pachos mishlosha. And then you have avir less than 3 tvachim. So picture 104. Schach pasel, that's to the right, that's the white, less than dalad amos. And then right next to it, you have avir that's less than 3 tvachim. My Rabbi, what would you say about that case? And he said to them, kshera. Halacha is kasha. Why Rabbi say? Because again, you have schach pasel, which is less than dalad amos, which is not a problem, and avir less than 3 tvachim, not a problem. So they said to him, malye b'shipudin, mai. So they said to Rabbi, tell us, if you put shipudin, right? If you went ahead and you put, this is picture 105, you put metal rods into the area where the airspace once was, what would be the halacha? Psula. So Rabbi said it's possible. So they said to Rabbi, I don't understand. Lo yehi avir haposel b'shlosha kischach posel haposel ba'arba amos. But Rabbi, why is that? Why is that? How can you say that? Avir again is more chomer than schach posel. Schach posel only posels by arba amos. Avir pasels by 3 tvachim. If the avir wasn't the problem, how could introducing schach pasel now become a problem? Va'amina lehu ana. And I said to them, I say the following: Hi mai bishlama lididi da'amina arba amos. So Rabbi says, I'm going to explain this to you. According to me, da'amina arba amos mishum mishum shiura v'lav shiuro. Excuse me, v'lav shiura hu hi lav shiurahu. Kevan de lo shavu shiurayu lahadadi lo mitztarfi. So Rabbi says, you can't ask that kasha on me. Because I'll tell you why. You see, according to me, all of this is about shiurim, things that satisfy shiurim and things that don't satisfy the shiur. Now what does it mean? Look at the top Rashi. Mishum shura v'lav shiuruhu, da'arba amos havi shir lifsol, or bepachos mikad, eno shir lifsol, ve'ein hatam mishum dofen akuma. Elakach shiur lifsol, halacha l'moshe misinai, kishar kol shiurim. So Rabbi says like this. Rabbi says, for me, apparently Rabbi doesn't feel that this is an issue of dofen akuma. According to Rabbi, there is halacha l'moshe misinai. But what does halacha l'moshe misinai say? The halacha l'moshe misinai doesn't say anything about dofen akuma. The halacha l'moshe misinai says schach pasol. And what is the halacha l'moshe misinai of schach pasol? That schach pasol is posel bedalid amos. And what? But what's the big qualifier according to Rabbi? The chiddush of Rabbi? It doesn't matter where it is. I don't care if it's by the side. I don't care if it's by the wall. I don't care if it's in the middle. There is one halacha of schach pasol, and that is if it's daled amos or more, it invalidates the sukkah. If it's less than daled amos, it doesn't. And therefore, Rabbi says, according to me, everything is mishum shiura. V'lav shiurahu high lav shiur. Again, there's one fundamental question that we have to look at in every single case. Is there a shiur schach pasol, or isn't there a shiur of schach pasol? So therefore, in this case that you just asked me, therefore, kevan de lo shavu shirai lahadadi lo mitztarfi. So we'll say, Rabbi says, when you asked me the case before of when you have pachos midalid amos of schach pasol. Remember, this was picture 104. When you asked me before about this case of where I had less than 4 amos of schach pasol, less than 3 tvachim of open space, Rabbi says, you know why that's kosher in my opinion, according to my shita, because those are 2 different shiurim. The shiur for schach pasol and the shiur for Aryeh are 2 different shiurim, and therefore what? They don't combine. But therefore, when you go ahead and you put in shipudin over there, and now there's no longer Aryeh but there's schach pasol, yes, those shiurim do combine. Ela ledidachu da amisu shir mishum haflaga mali ispalag b'schach pasol mali ispalag b'schach pasol va'avir. So we'll say, listen to this. But Rabbi says to the Talmidim of Rav, but you who hold that this whole issue is an issue of haflaga. I will say, what does this mean? Look at Rashi. Ela ledidachu da amisu shira dido mishum haflaga daha arba'a deka amisu. And I will say, what Rabbah is specifically referring to over here is the Talmidim of Rav made a statement. And what was their statement? That schach pasol is posel bedalit tvachim. And I will say, Rashi points out over here that Rabbah says to them, that statement was not made in the Mishnah. Right? Remember again, the Mishnah only spoke about 2 cases, which was what? Avir minat sad, 3 tvachim, and dofen akuma. The Mishnah makes no mention of a patch of schach pasol in the middle of the sukkah. But yet the Talmidim of Rav had this Masorah from their Rebbe that schach pasels by dal tvachim. So Rabbi says to them, he says, Daha arba de karmisu, this 4 tvachim that you mentioned before, look to lub masnis, and it's not mentioned in the Mishnah, linyan schach pasel, vaha svara minaluchu asun. So where do you know this from? That schach pasels by dal tvachim. Because again, you're not making this up. I'm not telling you that you're making it up, but I know where you get it from. You get it from because other areas in halacha say that's what? That dalit tfachim is a makom chashuv. That dalit tfachim is the minimum shear for a significant area. However, therefore again, lios makom chashuv liatzmo. Atem omrim sha'av zeh makom ulatzmo. Therefore, you say that when there are dalit tfachim of schach pasol, that also becomes its own makom for itself. V'chotzeit pasuk zula sosa kishtayim ve'in defanos lahem mali ispak. So also listen to this. So Rabbi says to the Talmidim of Rav, your whole shita is based on schach pasol going in and creating independent spaces, right? So you go in and you say that schach pasol goes in and pasol by dal tvachim. The Mishnah never said that. The halacha never states that. But you take this concept from elsewhere that dal tvachim is a significant rishus, and you apply it to sukkah. Well, if that's the case, and that's what he means, he says, let's read it one more time in the Gemara. According to you as the students of Rav, who said that you have this schach pasol and it pasels by dalat tvachim, because that creates its own independent area, the amisu shir mishum haflaga. Haflaga also means separation. That when you have dalat tvachim of schach pasol, that separates that area from the rest of the sukkah. Mali ispalig b'schach pasol, mali ispalig b'schach pasol va'avir. So Rabbi says to him, I don't understand if the whole idea is that having schach pasol in the middle demarcates, creates a line of demarcation and separates the sukkah, so then who cares if the separation is because of schach pasel by itself or because of schach pasel and avir? What Rabbah is saying to them is those two things should really combine according to your shita. You see, by me, says Rabbah, I have a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and my halacha l'Moshe Misinai tells me what? Schach pasel pasels by dalit amas. It's a din in shiurim. There's no real room for discussion, nor is there any real room for what? For combining different concepts because they are independent shiurim. But by you made up this shiur of dalit tvachim. Again, I'm not arguing on it. I hear the merit in it. But you made up the shiur in dalit tvachim. Why? Because dalit tvachim creates a separation. Good. So you know what else creates a separation? Airspace. So therefore, by you, if it's all about separation, then really avir, airspace, and dal tvachim should in fact combine. So therefore, remember, the case that Rabbah asked on them was the case of where you have pachos midal tvachim aschach chasher, right next to what? Pachos mishloshat tvachim of avir. Rabbah says, really, according to your shita, those two things should really combine to form a separation, essentially a break in the sukkah, thereby really invalidating the sukkah because now each sukkah really only has two walls. Again, also remember, the kasha only comes up in a 3-wall sukkah. If you had a 4-wall sukkah, technically speaking, what you have then is what? You have 2 kosher sukkahs. So the Gemara says the following. Amrle Abaye, so Abaye responds the following. Now this is Abaye jumping in over here, and Abaye says to Rabbah, Ulamar nami nihida lo shavu shirai besuka gidola besuka kitana milo shavu shirayu. So also Abaye brings up something very interesting. So Abaye says to Rabbah, you know what, Rabbah, I understand. You're saying that you can't combine schach pasel and avir because they're 2 different shiurim, and you have a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that tells you, or your Mesuras of the Halacha l'Moshe Misinai, is that Lamais against Chach Pasel pasels by Arba Amos wherever it is, and you can't combine that with Avir. I understand that. However, Besukkah Kitana Milo Shavu Shirayu. But when it comes to a small sukkah, would the shiurim not be the same? Rabbi say, what does that mean? Look at Rashi. Besukkah Kitana Sheshirem Mitzumsam. Rabbi say, Sukkah Kitana is a sukkah with exact dimensions. What's exact dimensions for our purposes? 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. Milo shavu shirai, would the shiur not be the same? Now look at Rashi. Al karchach echad zeh ve'echad zeh psula begimel tvachim. So also here's what's interesting. What Abaye says to Rabbah is there is a case where you would have to agree that the shiurim will be the same, and that's where in a sukkah kitana. Rabbi says, because what happens in a sukkah kitana? Any amount, whether it's schach pasel or whether it is avir, will pasel with what? 3 tvachim. Why? Dechevan de nafak mitoras lavud chashiv lebatzuri l'shiurei de sukkah. Dechevan de shavu shirai le'inyan shum sukkah litztarfei. So Abaye raises something very interesting. He says, Rabbah, don't say that your shiurim don't combine because there is a case where they would combine, or not combine is the wrong word. There is a case where the shiurim would be the same. What's the case where they would be the same? By a sukkah kitana. I'll say now. Hear this out. If you have a sukkah that's exactly zayin al zayin, 7 by 7, 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. So let's say again you have 3 tvachim of open space. What's the halacha? 3 tvachim or more of open space. So, right, 3 tvachim or more. Remember, again, I want to be clear. When it comes to lavud only works with less than 3 tvachim. 3 tvachim exactly or more is problematic. So when I say 3 tvachim, just going forward, next 6 years, right? Again, just understand that means 3 tvachim or more. So one more time, you have open space of 3 tvachim. What's the halacha? Good. Pasel, right? Pasel, right? What happens if you have schach pasel 3 tvachim? No, you see, again, I will say, in the case, right? You see what Abaye is bringing up over here. Exactly. In the case of where Abaye is bringing up over here, this is where everything turns in. This is why it's an interesting kasha. See, in the case of 7 by 7, where you have schach pasel, Abaye will say, Rabbi, you have to agree that that's not going to be kosher. Why? Because you can't apply the standard of Dalit Amos to a sukkah mitzum, to a sukkah katan. Because in a case of sukkah katan, everything changes, and anything that's more than 3 tvachim by definition will negate the minimum measurement of a sukkah. Now we'll see if this is true halacha l'maisa or not. But Abaye is suggesting that according to Rabbah, even you have to agree that in the case of a sukkah kitana, because you have very little to work with over here, anything more than 3 tvachim is going to destroy the sukkah. Whether that's 3 tvachim of schach pasel or 3 tvachim of schach, because again, Rabbi say, what does that mean? You're going to tell me that in a sukkah kitana, Rabbi still holds his shiur. You know what that means? If you're going to say it, you know what that's going to mean in a sukkah kitana? That you don't need any schach. Because schach puzzle only puzzles at Al Ramos, no problem. I'm pachos mikashir. Obviously, that's not a position. That's not a. So Abai says because it's fascinating. Abai saying according to Rabba, there is a case where you agree that all the shiurim are equal. Again, we're not talking about combining over now. All the shiurim are equal, and that's in the Sukkah Kitana. So Amarle, so Rabba says, "Come on, Abai, leave me alone." Amarle, it's not a direct quote, but Amarle Hasam. Lav mishum de shavu shirai lahadadi. You know that's not the reason. The reason is not because that the shir of schach pas and the shir of avir are the same. Ela mishum de lesi de shiur de sukkahu. That's a different case. In that case of a sukkah, what we call a sukkah kitana, which is an exact sukkah, that's different because anything more than 3 tvachim, you no longer have the shiurim of sukkah. See, I'm talking about a din in schach, a din in shiurim. That's different. Anything more than 3 tvachim in a sukkah like that, whether it's open space or whether it's schach puzzle, just destroys the dimensions of sukkah. So don't bring me a raya from that case. So the Gemara says, now, the Rabbah says something very interesting. Now also remember, Rabbah said before, the reason I cannot go ahead and combine schach puzzle along with avir is why? Because they are 2 different shiurim. So the Gemara says, is that true? That wherever I have 2 different shiurim, the shiurim do not combine. V'hatzanan we learned, habeged shlosha al shlosha. Abba said this is talking about the minimum shiurim of different types of garments or fabrics for to be makabel tuma. So a beged, a garment, is only makabel tuma if it has an area of 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim. Hasak, a sak is actually a sack. Arba al arba, 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. Ha'or, a hide of an animal. Chamisha, 5 tvachim by 5 tvachim. Mafatz, a mat. Shisha al shisha, 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. V'tani al again, each of these items have a different shear for Kabbalah's Tumah. V'tani alon, we said about this. Habeged v'hasak, hasak v'ha'or, ha'or v'hamafatz, mitztarfim ze im ze. But yet we learned elsewhere that what Rabbi said. Let's say you were to sew some of these items together. Were to sew together a beged with a sack, or a sack with a hide, or a hide with a mat. What's the halacha? They combine. So what do you see from here? You see from now, remember, so when it says they combine, it means that they could combine together to form a shiur that's capable of being mekabel tumah. So what do you see from here? You see from here, mitzvah from zeh. That Rabbi said, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is these are each items that what? Have dissimilar shiurim, but yet what? They could combine together to go ahead. It's allergy season this morning over here, right? They combine together to go ahead and form the shiur for the psul not for the psul, but they combine together to form the shiur of Kabbalah's Tumah, to which the Gemara. So now again, remember, Rabbah said before that Lemaisa 2 items of dissimilar shiurim do not combine, and now what? We're seeing they do. To which the Gemara says, Hasam kidiktani taima. No, there it's different. Because there we said there being Tumah. There by Tumah it's different. Why? Amar Rabbi Shimon, matam, hoil v'roi letame moshav kidisnat rosa. Because there, all fabrics have one basic common denominator, which is they can all become tameh through what we call moshav. Moshav means sitting on top of the item. Now, what does this mean? Kidisnan, hamikatseah, mikulon tefach al tefach. Rabosai, if you were to go ahead and literally take any one of the aforementioned fabrics or garments or items and trim away until you whittle it down to a tefach al tefach, it's still mikabel tuma. Tame. So the Gemara says, how could that be? Tevach al tevach l'may chaz. You're both saying in general, in order for an object to be mikabel tuma, it has to be usable for something. What is a piece of fabric? Again, any one of these items, the mat, the sack, the garment, the hide, what are they usable by a shiur of tefach al tefach l'may chazi? V'Rav Shimon Lakish mishum Rabbi Yanai hoil v'roi litlo al gabe hachamor. Because you're both saying again l'maysa, what can they be used for? They can be used to patch a saddle on top of a donkey. So we'll say the chap over here is that each of these items, there is a basic common denominator, and that's what? And they could all be used, even in a very small shiur, for a significant purpose. In this case, patching the saddle on the donkey. Because they have this significant common denominator, that allows for what? That allows for them combining for shiurim. So again, this is not a good right. So in general, we might say that things don't combine for shiurim. But again, over here, because they have this strong common denominator, that's why they can combine. In Surah, They said over this teaching, as we just mentioned it before, Benaharda, in Naharda, however, Masnu, Benarda, Masnu, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. In Naharda, they had the following version of this exchange. That Rav Yehuda said the name of Shmuel, Schach Posel, Posel Be'emtza, Schach Posel Be'emtza, Posel Ba'arba. So I will say again, so in Naharda, they had this version that it wasn't Rav who was saying this. It wasn't the Talmidim of Rav saying this in the name of Rav, but rather it was Shmuel who was saying it. And what did Shmuel say? Shmuel said, Schach posel be'emtza, posel barba. If you have schach posel in the middle, yeah, I will say, if you take a look, so again, just to clarify this, in Surah, the version that we read before, about schach posel be'emtza ba'arba, minatzad arba amos, and avir shlosha tvachim. In Surah, the version was that Rav said that. In Naharda, the version is going to be that Shmuel said it. So that's what we're about to read now. So Rav Yehuda said in Shmuel, schach posel be'emtza posel ba'arba. If you have schach posel in the middle of the sukkah, that pasels with 4 tvachim. Minatzad from the side, posel ba'arba amos. It pasels with 4 amos. The Rav Amar, and Rav says, bein minatzad be'emtza ba'arba amos. And I will say, in Naharda, the version they had is that Rav argued on the statement of Shmuel, and Rav said that what? Rav said that no, that Lamaisa Schach Pasel only pasels where? Are at a shiur of Dalaramas, and it doesn't matter if it's in the middle or on the side. And I will say, you understand now, again, the Machlokis is the same, just the names are different. So in Surah, it was Rav who was saying that Schach Pasel be'emtzaz dal tfachim, minatzad Dalaramos, and it was Rabbah who was arguing on that. In Naharda, it's Shmuel who's saying Schach Pasel be'emtza dal tfachim, minatzad arba amos, and it's Rav who's arguing on that and saying that Lamaisa Schach Pasel is always Pasel dalet amos. Tanan, we learned Nasan aleha neser shurachav arba tfachim. If you placed on the sukkah a board that was 4 tfachim wide, kshera, it works, it's good. So the Gemara says, Bishlam al Rav Damar bein be'emtza bein minatzad ba'arba amos mishum hachi kshera. The Rabbi said, now you have a Mishnah telling me that if I place the board that's 4 tfachim wide on schach, it's kosher. So according to Rav, that makes sense. Why? Because Rav holds that what Rabbi say, schach posel only posels at a shiur of what? It only pasels at a shiur of dalet amos. Elo. Bishlam Rav Damar bein be'emtza bein minatzad ba'arba amos kshera. Elo Shmuel Damar be'emtza ba'arba amai kshera. But according to Shmuel, who says that schach posel invalidates at a shiur of dalit tfachim, then what is there to say? Hacha bayaskina, what's the case? Minatzad. The case here is, where did you place the board? You place the board on the side of the sukkah. If you place the board on the side of the sukkah, then what? Schach posel minatzad is only pasels at how much? 4 amos, and therefore again, placement of the board is not a problem. All right, we'll stop over here. We're leaving off in the middle of this machlokes. We've left Surah. We've done a lot today. We've gone from Surah now, Baruch Hashem, to Naharda, and in Naharda, the machlokes looks like this. We have Shmuel telling us. Also, again, just so you understand, why is it that how does it change in Surah Naharda? Again, remember, just so you understand, who was the Rav of Naharda? Shmuel. Who was the Rav of Naharda? Who was the Rav of Surah? Rav. And I will say, essentially what happens over here is in each yeshiva, they had their Rebbe coming out on top. Right? Because again, we're going to see, it's the sheet of Shmuel that is halach l'maisa. We'll see that more tomorrow. But again, l'maisa, so where we're leaving off over here is a fundamental machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel telling us that schach posel, everything depends where it is. Minatzad, it pasels at how much? Dalet amos, which seems to be the din of dof and akuma. Ba'emtza, in the middle, what happens? 4 tfachim. Everybody's agreeing that avir pasels at a distance of 3 tfachim or more. Rav comes along and says, no, there is one shiur for schach pasel. So Rav in this version and Rav in the previous version were saying the same thing. That there's one shiur for schach pasel, and that is dalet amos. It doesn't matter if it's minatzad, it doesn't matter if it's in the middle. We'll continue with the machlokes tomorrow, Amir Tzasha.